Right now, we're going to welcome in our next guest. We've got Noi Mahoney joining us to talk about what's going on at the border. Noi, thank you for being here. And in your Borderlands article over the weekend, of course, we talked a little bit about what's going on with traffic from a side of things, but we also have an interesting story from Cargobot talking about the rate of nearshoring. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, good morning. And I just want to say, Anthony, I believe you could take a bear. I believe in you.
Thanks, Noi. Someone has to believe in us.
But Cargobot, yes, is a Miami-based digital freight brokerage that sees big opportunities with expanding trade in the United States because of nearshoring, as you mentioned. And, you know, these past 2 years, we've been seeing more and more firms move their manufacturing to countries like Mexico to take advantage of USMCA trade benefits, such as no tariffs on imported goods and stuff like that. And Cargobot sees more opportunities as we go forward, because right now in Mexico, the vacancy rate for commercial real estate space is about 2%, and along the U.S.-Mexico border, the vacancy rate for commercial real estate, for warehouses and distribution centers, is less than 1%. So we're seeing, great demand for logistics spaces, and that's going to just get tighter as we go forward and more factories come online and send, more goods to the U.S.
And knowing we're looking at that borderland area, of course, it's becoming more and more popular, but are we seeing that borderland is starting to expand at all in terms of activity, or any plans to expand that area either further south, a little bit further north?
We're seeing before, when we looked at nearshoring, it was mostly centered along the Texas-Mexico border. And now what I'm noticing is it's spreading to, New Mexico, Arizona, even parts of Baja California, which is just south of San Diego. So we're seeing the whole border area region become, pretty in demand for logistics spaces. And as you mentioned, it's also moving south in Mexico. Before, where it had just been centered along the border, we're starting to see central Mexico and even parts of southern Mexico attract more manufacturers, more need for logistics spaces and industrial centers.
So, Noi, as you mentioned, the warehouse vacancy rate is slim on the Mexican side of things. How is it on the U.S. side of the border? We know that cities like Laredo have undergone just absolutely massive expansion over the last kind of 9 to 12 months. Are we seeing the vacancy rates still be as low as they are in Mexico? And what is that doing to actual warehousing rates? How expensive is it to find space right now?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I know in Texas, especially as you mentioned in Laredo and some of the border cities, commercial real estate is extremely competitive. I believe it was, I forgot the company I wrote about a few weeks ago, but a major logistics company opened a place in Laredo, and they told me how difficult it was just to find, a reasonably sized space to put, a new distribution center. So it's very competitive in places like Laredo, even El Paso, and in places like New Mexico and Arizona, which don't quite have as much infrastructure yet. I see demand going up in those places as well. Their issue is, can they build fast enough? And that'll be interesting to see how places such as, like I said, New Mexico, Arizona, really try to take advantage of this nearshoring phenomenon.
And Noi, with that lack of infrastructure being built up or being built fast enough, or availability, do we see any usage of repurposing maybe old facilities, malls, things like that, being turned into warehouse distribution centers?
That's an interesting subject, and I've seen some of that happen here in Texas. I don't know how it goes, and I don't know how if that's happening in Mexico as much, but I know here in San Antonio, South Texas, Laredo, I've seen malls and sort of old military bases get repurposed into, distribution centers or warehouses. And I hope that trend continues, because for a while, especially in this part of Texas, there was, huge malls, military bases, because of BRAC had been shut down, and there was just a lot of vacant industrial buildings. And it's good to see, these types of facilities get use again in such an important way, because distribution centers are so important to our supply chain.
So I know last week when we talked, we of course were covering the hours-long wait times that were happening at the border in Eagle Pass and El Paso, Texas. We've talked a lot about how now drivers are having to wait, in some cases, 12 to 16 hours in their trucks just idling to get through those border crossings. Any update on the wait times so far this week? Have things started to maybe smooth out a little bit, or is the situation still just as bad?
The situation is still pretty fluid. I was checking news reports this morning, and the situation in El Paso is still, as you mentioned, pretty tough for truck drivers. What's occurring is because of the migrant situation, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, shifted their personnel around to migrant duties instead of customs, instead of clearing trucks, processing trucks. And on top of that, the Texas Department of Public Safety began conducting secondary inspections, which further backed up trucks trying to get across the border. And that situation is still ongoing. The Texas Department of the Texas DPS is still conducting those secondary inspections, which is causing, major headaches in El Paso. I believe there are other ports as well, as like the Port of Del Rio, which is in far south Texas. They're also checking trucks coming across the border there. So it's a tough situation still for truck drivers trying to get across here in Texas.
And definitely a lot more stories in your article, Noi. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we're definitely going to be following up with you as these stories develop.
Thank you so much.